We will not allow ourselves to be exploited again, because we know what we must do. We will not allow ourselves again to be slaves of anybody. We are going to take charge of our own future. The continent was a victim of brutal colonialism, all the way to slave trade, exploitation, and everything in between. The African Union led in the charge for independence. We now have 54 independent states. You have asked us what assurance we can get that this will not be repeated again. I can tell you without fear of any contradiction that we do not need any assurance from anybody. We will do it ourselves. We will not allow ourselves again, as leaders from this continent, we will take charge of our own destiny. And that is why a conference like this is taking place in Nairobi, because we are recalibrating our relationship with our partners. And we have been absolutely clear that this is a relationship of equals. At the heart of this relationship is sovereign equality. At the heart of this relationship is not extraction, is not exploitation. It is investment for mutual benefit. And we are not entitled. We are not asking, to be favored. No. We are asking that we know we have responsibilities. We also know that others have responsibilities. And the reason why we had a candid conversation this afternoon, even amongst ourselves as Africans, there are things we can do for ourselves. The challenge is when you go and seek for help for things you can do for yourself. We cannot continue that way. And we are saying we are up to the task. Let me give you an example. We had a candid conversation this afternoon that while we go and look for financing our projects using other people's money, we have money in Africa. We have $4 trillion of savings in our pension funds, in our insurance companies, in our reinsurance companies, and yet we are not using that money to fund our own development. The first thing we need to do, and we have agreed with Africa Development Bank, we have agreed with Afrexim, we have agreed with Trade Development Bank, Africa Finance Corporation, that before we go and look for money from other people, we must structure our own DFIs to unlock these $4 trillion of our own resources to finance our development. So, we will not allow ourselves to be exploited again, because we know what we must do. And what we are saying is, we don't want to also blame others for our own mistakes. President Kagame told us today that nobody owes us development. We owe it to our own selves. So we mustn't look for favors where we can do it ourselves. Secondly, Aliko Dangote told us today that our own private sector in this continent must first and foremost invest in our continent before we go looking for other investors from elsewhere. Yeah. The question people ask, if our own private sector does not have the confidence to invest in our continent, why would private sector from elsewhere have the confidence? Yeah. If we are not ready to mobilize our own resources here in Africa, resources that are available to us in pension funds, in insurance companies, why would anybody else use their savings to finance our own development? So first things first, we must take the lead as Africans, as policymakers, as private sector leaders in taking charge of our own development. Any other support we get from friends like Macron and other people will be secondary. To answer your question, we will not allow ourselves again to be slaves of anybody. We are going to take charge of our own future. Number two, somebody has asked tangible progress. What tangible progress have we achieved here? And how are we going to approach the G7? Let me say the following, that we have agreed on three fundamental things. We've agreed, number one, is we must develop an innovative mechanism of raising resources at scale, at speed, for our own development, and it starts with us. All we will be asking at the G7, in fact, we will not be asking for money from the G7. What are we asking from the G7? We are asking them to put in call-up capital. We are asking them to put in guarantee, not money. We will use our own institutions to mobilize resources to undertake our own infrastructure development. That's what we'll be going to the G7 to do. Simple. You know, in the past, we've been going to ask for aid and loans and things and more. We are saying there are things we can do by ourselves. Number two, we will be having a conversation as an outcome of this meeting on our human capital dividend. Our young people, the people of this continent, are the greatest asset that we have. They will form the workforce of the future, they will form the market of the future, and they will drive innovation, creativity, artificial intelligence, and technology. So we have one of the biggest assets. What we have agreed is, how do we make that, how do we build the capacity for that asset? Through education, through training, making sure they have access to the internet, making sure that they have access to technology. The rest, the young people of this continent can do it for us and for the globe. And finally, we have agreed on energy transition. That energy transition is not just going to be about energy. It's going to be both transition in development and transition in transformation itself. So energy being, because I have said in my closing statement, there is no region, no country that can industrialize in the dark. We need energy. So these are the three most important things that I see as a take-home from this conference, and I'm very, very proud of the outcome of this conference, and I want to thank my brother Macron for being here with us, using his network to work with us. And we came here as heads of state because we know that first and foremost, it is our responsibility as heads of state in this government to take charge of our own development. My good brother is here as a friend, and we can only leverage on his friendship to be able to get to others so that we can fashion one trajectory for development together. Mr. President.
Merci, Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. really important to have a representative of the African continent there at the G7 when we're talking about international crises to solve, because Africa suffers from these crises as much as anyone else, and too often Africa is left out of these international discussions. Africa has been the most severely struck by the consequence of the war of aggression by Russia against Ukraine because of the cereal and fertilizer imports that have been affected. This caused enormous problems, as well as, and we saw this with the 2022 farm project, and now we're looking into other modalities. And what we see happening with the Strait of Hormuz right now, we see again the primary victims are here in Africa. We heard this from the captains of industry today. We heard it from other stakeholders. The price at the pump and the increase in the price of the barrel have major impacts. And in the terms of the food supply chain, it is, remember, a third of the ships arriving with inputs to Africa come through the Strait of Hormuz. And so once again, this is a moral and political failing not to have that representation of the African continent in the G7. And so when we talk about those major global crises, we're going to have to talk about consequences on the African continent. So that's the first issue. Now, the second one about the issue of financial architecture and the need for guarantees, which is what I would call a native issue to the G7. And I discussed this with President Ruto. We want to give a clear message, and that is to calibrate the global imbalance in this regard. The heart of the G7's economic environment, the world in which we are working, is focused on very problematic macroeconomic issues. Overcapacity from China, issues from the USA, European perspectives, and not enough of this gets discussed with Africa's place on the whole value chain, agriculture, industry, you name it. If developed economies do not adhere to that agenda, and that's the first thing, we've got to get them to respect the rules. Secondly, then how would we even be able to hope to make a difference? And so all of the G7 and their partners like India, Brazil, South Korea, and others who are invited to the G7, it's important for all of those countries to adhere to that agenda. And it's not the G7 countries that are mostly doing this. But when it comes to raw material exports, for example, when you look at primary commodities and rare earths, we've got to make sure that Africa is part of the conversation. We have a shared agenda for the G7 and for Africa, which is of great strategic importance. And now, in some ways, we've got to counter the predators of the 21st century, those who want to get their hands on Africa's resources and retain the global market control. So this is something really concrete that we're going to discuss. We have a shared strategy to make sure that Africa is further up the that value chain and can play its full part as a sovereign player. And so that's why we're going to the G7 together, and also because we want to have maximum support among the G7 members for this mechanism for guaranteeing and guarantees that we want to expand across the continent. There are some guarantees that already exist that would cover primary losses, and some member states based in the region are already part of that. We've got the African Development Bank, who comes off with one vehicle for everybody. It'll be a Pan-African vehicle, which means that when capital is guaranteed, that means that our infrastructure investments via the African Development Government will be guaranteed. And this will attract more private sector investment because those guarantees will be in place. This is something extremely concrete, very tangible, and it's something that we are very excited about. And the second question was the health risk alerted associated with the hantavirus, and I was discussing this with the Prime Minister when the first cases appeared, and obviously we've seen an acceleration of events over the weekend, and the Prime Minister and the government have taken the right decision. The Minister of Health has said it several times, the best experts have been consulted, as we always do when it comes to making decisions like this. And France has a very rigorous case tracing protocol, and it takes into consideration all of the scientific data that we have concerning the incubation period and the initial stages of infection. And building on that, the government is setting up very rigorous health protocols, and countries like Spain and other countries who have had experience in this. Remember, this is a known virus, so it's different to what we've just been through a few years ago, but we've learned a lot from COVID-19 and that epidemic, and so the government is taking the right decisions. The situation is currently under control thanks to our the work that's been done, and we thank those who've been so responsive on this. And now at the European level, I'm thinking that an EU-wide protocol might be, and then also the the World Health Organization is going to have to issue its own recommendations, but we're still working on the evolving situation.
Very latest question, which, if I understood properly, was directly addressed to me and was in a certain way more political and personal. If you ask me, in my regard, what is the most important issue for humanity and my main responsibility, I would probably answer you, our children. Our children. And I think because we can take a lot of decisions. Some of them are sometimes largely too short-term driven. It could be a necessity. And sometimes you have to take, I would say, the second best decision, because we all decide under a lot of constraints. But the most important decisions we take in our capacities, and I think it's true for head of state governments and business leaders, entrepreneurs, artists, is when you try to take into consideration the long run. And I think a lot of decisions we took today are for the long run because they are very demanding and we are transforming a lot of things. But this is not a reason not to take them. And I think the main transformation are the one you decide when you are precisely inspired by the next generation and our children. And I think this is a question of fairness as well. Because the only one not to be present in this room are our children, or the children to be born. And this is why they are the one to inspire us. And they are the one that we have to take into consideration in our decisions because they are not yet around the table. And this is why when we speak about education and health, economic opportunities, Africa's opportunities, when we speak about peace, when we speak about as well how to protect children and teenagers against inappropriate content, especially in the digital environment, we are doing the most important things. So my main responsibility is to do my best for our children.
I want to agree with my good brother, President Macron, on the question we were asked, what is the single most important thing? And I would want to say that in the context that he has said, because for this continent, our children will determine the markets of the future. There will be 1 in every 4 people in the world by 2050 will be African. Those are our children. They will determine the markets. They will determine energy consumption. They will be the world's workforce, and they will drive technology. So that is the biggest asset that we have, and that is why it's education, it's health, it's training, and its empowerment is critical for our future. And finally is to say that because of exactly what President Macron has said, certainly we will have more children than them. And that is why the debate in the past was, are we facing east or are we facing west? I have kept on saying we are facing forward. But yesterday, the young people of this continent told me facing forward is facing south, because that's where the future is.
Thank you.
I request that we now be upstanding. Can we give another warm clap?
Brothers and sisters of the African continent, after watching this video, what are your thoughts on this video? Subscribe, like, share, and give us your valuable thoughts on the comments section below. As the Africa Forward Summit continues, we will keep on updating you with everything that is happening on this summit. Be with us. Stay tuned. Thank you.